Welcome to the Parenting Tips Podcast. I'm Jeff Reiland, the host of this podcast series. In this episode, we're going to be talking about mental illness and addiction, and still also being a parent. Please make this episode the starting point of your journey to understanding how to parent when also struggling with a mental illness or an addiction. Whether you are a parent who can identify having a mental illness or addiction, or you're co-parenting with a parent who has or currently is struggling with mental illness or addiction, this episode will lay the foundation for understanding how to talk with children about these illnesses and how to take care of yourself. Each episode in this series will look at what the science tells us about these specific illnesses and how you can become a more effective parent even if you have a mental illness or an addiction. In this series of the Parenting Tips Podcast episodes, we will talk about parenting with depression, parenting with anxiety, parenting with bipolar disorder, parenting with addiction, and parenting with past trauma. Several episodes will follow that also discuss early life stresses, resilience, protective factors for our children, and the social determinants of health. While these episodes are somber, each of them also carries a message of hope, courage, and dignity. Parenting is the hardest job we never train for. We don't ask for mental illness or addiction, and sometimes we have to find ways to manage both. It is my goal that you will find acceptance, inspiration, comfort, and guidance in each of the episodes in this series. Why talk about it? For too long, mental illness and addiction have been hidden away. As a society, we've covered it up. We're ashamed. We see it as a weakness or a moral failing. We buy into the cultural and political messages that having an addiction or mental illness somehow makes someone less of a person. We judge, we criticize, we look down on those who suffer. Why would anyone want to talk about it? Thankfully, science has demonstrated that these afflictions are, in fact, diseases and disorders. And more enlightened generations of young people are much more open about their struggles. And we've discovered that we're not alone. Thank you for your courage to speak out, to be vulnerable, to not feel alone. First, this is not a small problem. An estimated 1/3 of children have a parent with anxiety or depression. 1 in 16 children have a parent with a bipolar disorder. 1 in 10 children live in a household with at least one parent with an alcohol use disorder. And 1 in 35 children live in households with at least one parent who has an illicit drug use disorder. And while experiencing trauma in childhood is not by itself a diagnosis and is more difficult to quantify, an estimated 2/3 of children born in America experience one or more forms of trauma before the age of 16. Many of these children go on to become parents. For this reason, we include a specific podcast on this topic for parents who have experienced trauma in their own childhood and may be noticing now how it's affecting their ability to parent their children today. Some people can suffer from more than one of the disorders that's discussed here. Please hang in there. There's hope and support. I've never been more optimistic about the future of mental health and addictions treatment and our country's willingness to talk about these issues as I am today. These podcast episodes are for parents and co-parents who want to know how to help children when they or their parenting partner struggle with mental illness or addiction. As I've mentioned, parenting is hard work, and it's made harder by stresses that are beyond our control. Having mental illness, including addictions, are stresses that people do not ask for. However, as parents, it is important to try to do something about them, to learn to manage them. Parenting is also joyful work, and it's made easier by having better tools in your parenting toolbox. Having better tools in your self-care toolbox is also really important. Regardless of what life has handed you, please take care of yourself. Many parents are selfless. They give and give and give. And when they feel empty and depleted, they still try to give. While that sounds really noble, it's also exhausting. Dealing with any mental health or addiction robs you of energy. This is energy you may not have in reserve to give to your kids. In earlier episodes of this podcast, I've shared that one of the most important things parents can do is to stay calm when their kids are not calm. It is hard to be calm when you're tired, highly anxious, exhausted, or irritable. There are many great strategies that parents can use to take care of themselves. And I also appreciate that sometimes, especially for single parents, these may be hard to practice, but please try. Try to get adequate sleep. Eat enough to sustain you, and get some exercise. I know these can be big asks for some parents, but they're critical in keeping your own battery charged enough to be present for your kids. Also consider building and maintaining social connections with those who understand and support you. Struggling with mental illness or addiction in isolation makes it harder than it has to be. There's an amazing feeling that comes over someone when they realize that they are not alone, that someone else understands them. In fact, one of the most powerful human experiences is that of being understood and accepted. If you think that you are struggling with a mental illness or addiction, that the content of these episodes feels too familiar, consider talking to your primary care provider or mental health professional about resources that you can use to help you to manage those specific symptoms so you can have more time and energy to be the parent that you want to be. Pay attention to how you think and talk about yourself. If you notice that your inner voice is constantly putting yourself down, constantly criticizing your mistakes or efforts, and keeping you stuck, think about how difficult that is in making it for you to change. No one asks for any of these diseases or disorders that they get. If you notice that you're your own worst critic, think about it differently. Yes, you make mistakes. Newsflash. We all make mistakes. Learn from them. Focus on the successes you achieve and how to keep achieving those successes. Celebrate progress, not perfection. Take pleasure in each moment of the journey. The destination comes soon enough. Please try to resist feeling ashamed or guilty for having a mental illness or addiction. Remember, you did not ask for this. However, you do have a responsibility and an opportunity to do something about it. Your well-being and your children's well-being would benefit greatly if you work on this. Knowledge is power. One of the reasons for putting this podcast series together was because I wanted parents to have the best knowledge, tools, and strategies the science of child development and best parenting practices can offer. Use this podcast as a springboard to learn more. There are additional resources provided in each of the show notes of the 6-episode series in this Parenting Tips podcast. You won't regret checking these out. You may have been wrestling with whether or not to talk with your child about what you're going through. You may be wondering why it might be important. As a parent, only you can and should decide what is best for you and your child. But here are some helpful basic guidelines. Most kids know that something is wrong or off. They may not understand what it is, but they certainly feel it. One of the greatest challenges is that children, in the absence of any explanation, will most likely blame themselves for what is going on with their parent. For all my years working as a therapist with children from households where the parent may struggle with addiction or mental illness or both, it's very common for the child to think that they have somehow caused the problem. They feel responsible for the parent's anger or anxiety or depression or absence. In reality, it's not their fault, and it's no one's fault. The circumstances are unfair. Consider providing limited information, which we will discuss in each episode related to that episode's topic, about what you're struggling with. You don't have to go into great detail. As a general rule, young children need less detail than teenagers would need. So, do you think your disorder affects your parenting? If the answer is yes, you're not alone. Studies show that 80% of parents who struggle with some mental health disorder would agree that it can affect their ability to parent well. Some examples of these illnesses include depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and addictions. When parents are moody, irritable, unpredictable, withdrawn, or unavailable, children are especially confused and sad. Mental illness disorders can lead to inconsistency in routines, quality time, and nurturing experiences. These are the very things that children need consistency in. A parent's mental illness or addiction can affect a child's sense of worth. It can affect a child's social and emotional development across their childhood. What a parent does to take care of themselves, manage their mental illness symptoms or addictive behaviors can also affect a child's self-worth. It can also affect a child's social and emotional development. When you take care of yourself, you're creating a foundation for being in a better place to be the best parent for your child. Studies also show that there are certain protective factors that you can build into your child's life that can help. According to Temple University's resources on mental health and parenting, there are many protective factors that can help your child be less vulnerable and negatively impacted by the struggles you are having with mental illness or addiction. See if you can identify some of the protective factors you already have in place or can work on. As we go through these protective factors, consider which ones you already have and which ones you want to work on. What can you control? The first one is a sense of being loved by a parent. Now, a child might define that differently than an adult. Sometimes kids think that if a parent loved them, they would buy them anything they wanted or let them do whatever they wanted. What children need and really want is quality time with their parent. Being present for your child, investing time with them, nurturing them with warmth, physical affection, and providing structure, consistency, and routine are key to creating that sense of being loved. Positive self-esteem. Children who think well of themselves tend to do better. Self-esteem is a bit of a moving target. We've all had bad moments or bad days. Young children tend to think in all or none ways. Statements like, "I'm a bad boy," or "I'm stupid," are the kinds of comments that sometimes reflect how a child is feeling about themselves in the moments after they've made a mistake or gotten into trouble. This is partly because their awareness of themselves is closely tied to what they do or don't do well. In episode 26 and 27, we talk about ways to give effective praise to help reinforce the kinds of behaviors you want to see in your children and to build their positive sense of self-esteem. Good coping skills. Coping skills are skills that children have to manage big emotions, deal with change or transitions, or learn to problem solve. These skills develop across time and involve lots of practice, modeling from parents and other adults, and positive reinforcement when they happen. They involve a child's ability to self-regulate. There are several episodes in this Parenting Tips podcast series that can help parents strengthen their children's coping skills, including episode 54 on flexible thinking, episode 55 on problem solving, episodes 47 and 48 on co-regulation and self-regulation, and episode 49 on teaching patience. Another protective factor for children is having positive relationships with friends. We discuss friendships with children in episodes 50, 51, and 52 in this podcast series. Another protective factor is having an interest in and success at school. Since school is an environment that children spend a great deal of time each day of the school year, we want kids to like going there. It's hard for children to spend 6 to 8 hours a day in a place they don't feel welcomed or doing something they don't feel like they're very good at. In episode 46, we talk about ways to create a language-rich home. This can be incredibly helpful for your child as they begin their school careers, since words, both spoken and written, are important for kids in navigating the world of school. Reading with your child also gives you an opportunity to create a positive memory for both of you. Parents showing interest in what their child did or learned that day can become a fun ritual and part of the daily routine of conversation in the family. It takes a village to raise a child. Parents play a lead role, but it's so helpful to have a strong supporting cast. Who are the other adults in your child's life? Are there trusted relationships with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and other relatives, close friends, neighbors, teachers, counselors, daycare providers, after-school program staff, coaches, pastors, or others that you can rely on to help guide your child? A protective factor is healthy engagement with adults outside the home. Another protective factor is the ability to talk about feelings. Talking about feelings is super helpful when it comes to growing protective factors for children. Many kids have strong emotions and can overreact to the smallest setbacks. Saying no can trigger tantrums. There are many ways parents can develop their children's ability to express their emotions. It's often very helpful to help a child identify what they're feeling. Sometimes parents have to use the words to connect them to the experiences for the child to better understand. For example, Ellie, you sound sad. I'm wondering if it's because we can't go to the park today because mommy is feeling sick. Check out episode 17, Big Deal, Little Deal, episode 29, Saying No, episode 47 and 48 on co-regulation and self-regulation for other ideas. There will also be future episodes on helping children with feelings. Parents who are functioning well at home, at work, and in relationships are yet another protective factor. Parents as people wear many hats. They are often employees. They have to go off to work in order to make money to pay the bills. They may also be partners in a romantic relationship with someone. They can be a co-parent, sometimes with a person they may no longer be in a relationship with. Parents have friends. Finally, they may have connections with their own siblings, parents, or other relatives. When these relationships are positive and enjoyable, life is much less stressful. When these relationships are stressful and time-consuming, it can take a toll on parents. It is not uncommon for young children to step up and take on some of the responsibilities that parents usually have in the family. On the one hand, this can show a child's willingness to help. It can teach responsibility. On the other hand, it can lead the child to being parentified or taking on responsibilities long-term that really belong to the parents. Some of the most incredible adults I know have had this experience, and while it has helped shape who they are today, it comes at a cost. When a parent works outside the home, it can also relieve some of the financial stress associated with having a family. It can be a source of self-worth and social connection with others. Not all parents can be employed for a number of reasons. For example, they may have disabilities that make work difficult, if not impossible. There may be limits to the kinds of jobs that are available. While parental employment can be a protective factor, it can also be an added stressor in that being away from children requires someone else to be present to care for them. This can become a financial juggling act. While it's true that money does not buy happiness, it can go a long way in reducing the stresses associated with living in poverty or worrying about safe housing, food, and paying bills. Many people who report being happy and successful as adults did not grow up with great material wealth, but they had enough. Most importantly, they had positive connections with their parents and a community of adults. Having a positive and supportive relationship with a parent is a protective factor. Mental illness and addictions can make this a challenge, especially when the illness or addiction is active and not well managed. This is one reason parental self-care is important. This is also a great incentive to keep learning about what kids need by adding to your parenting toolkit. Knowing about child development and parenting skills to have a positive relationship with your child or children can go a long way in helping your child. We've already mentioned that parents as people have a number of relationships. So do children. Having help from other safe and caring adults is critical for kids. It's even more important when a parent, for whatever reason, is not able to be there all the time. When kids and parents can rely on help and support from immediate and extended families, they do better. I would include community members here since its extended family may not always be available and may not be in the best situations to provide support. The bigger the safety net, the better off the child is. Something that you can do is to create a coping action plan. Involve your child in the conversation. What are the things that you and your child both notice when you are starting to have a difficult time with your mental illness or addiction? For example, do you become more withdrawn, more irritable? Write down the clues that things are starting to slip. Make a list of things your child can do to cope. What are the activities they can rely on to feel less sad, angry, anxious, or stressed, such as reading, coloring, playing with certain toys? Make a list of things your child can do to help, to make sure that they're taking care of their own responsibilities during their own chores and self-cares. Make a list of people that they can talk to or spend time with for their own support and how they can connect with them. It may be encouraging them to call grandma, hang out with an uncle, or talk with a counselor or teacher at school. Finally, have weekly and sometimes daily check-ins about how it's going with you and your child. It's important to give clear messages to children to help them cope with parental mental illness. Here are a few examples from the Temple University Collaborative on helping your child cope. I love you and care about you no matter what happens, even if I can't always show it. Feelings are okay. It's okay to be sad, mad, and upset, and to have all kinds of feelings when your family goes through hard times. You're not a bad person if you have feelings that feel bad, and it's normal to have a wide range of feelings about your family. It's okay to try to have fun, even if there's sickness or other problems in our family. I want you to have a good and happy life. You need to take care of yourself and have your own activities. Problems are a part of life. Lots of families have problems such as illness, divorce, money problems, alcoholism, and drug abuse. Problems can be solved or at least made better. There are several resources available online for you at no cost. For parents, Temple University Collaborative on Community Inclusion for Individuals with Psychiatric Disabilities, Parenting with Mental Illness, Helping Your Children Cope, and Temple University's collaboration on community inclusion for individuals with psychiatric disabilities, mental health and parenting, how your disability affects your child are excellent resources to check out. For children, there's a Freeline resource, a workbook, Between You and Me, that goes through a series of illnesses that parents can have and also includes activities and exercises to personalize the child's own experiences and develop coping strategies. These links can be found in the show notes. These are excellent and free resources for you to download, read, and use as a guide to help you understand your own mental health, plot a course for recovery, and engage your child in meaningful ways. If you are a parent and you struggle with one or several of these illnesses, I hope you find courage to keep going. There is great news in that there is hope and promise for a brighter future for you and your children. Knowing about your illness and how your illness may affect your child is so important. Knowledge is power. I have quoted Maya Angelou throughout this whole series. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Thank you for tuning in and considering this parenting topic. I hope this information added to your growing toolbox of parenting your child or children. Please consider exploring other topics in this series. Remember, no one parenting tool can do everything. We need many tools to become the best parents for our children. Your children's future depends on you and the time and effort you invest in them today.